Hi everyone, it's Matt with Mineral Stains. Today I'm going to go over all of our products that we use on masonry. So the first product is right above me, right there, which is our ECO-PRIM. That is our primer that's made with water glass. So all of our products are basically made with the same ingredient, or our key ingredient, which is water glass, known as potassium silicate. So the primer is translucent for a reason. Without the colorants and the fillers, it's able to penetrate deeper into any brick or mortar or any other masonry substrate. Thus, it's going to prevent additional coats. So for instance, if you have a brick or mortar that's very thirsty, it's going to continue absorbing the product. So the primer is going to eliminate some of that. And if there are any streaks on the building, it's also going to prevent any streaks. It's going to give you more of a uniformity. So if you want to think about if a wall on your east side of the house or building gets about 10 hours of sunlight versus the west side, keep in mind that, let's say the building is 40, 50, or 60 years old. The texture is a little bit worn down on this side. It's a little bit more beaten down. What the primer is going to help and do is bring uniformity across all four sides of the building, for example. And so just like any primer that you would use on drywall, it's going to give you a uniformity. It's not going to bleed through, and that's what the ECO-PRIM is intended for. If you happen to use our masonry stain, it's a little bit too thick, you could also use the ECO-PRIM and dilute it up to 10%, where most manufacturers are going to make a mistake with recommending water as a dilution. We don't recommend that, because if you add water to a previously made formula behind us with the masonry stains, you're going to weaken the product. So the primer also has water glass, so you're kind of using the same ingredient when diluting the product. And sometimes, it's easier just to add water. Yes, you're going to save a little bit of money, but you're also breaking down the colorants and the fillers in the masonry stain. So the ECO-PRIM is going to be a primer and a 10% diluter. The next product is our fixative. That's also a primer slash thinner, and it's right behind us, right over here. So if you see the difference between the fixative and our ECO-PRIM, it has a little bit more of a milky finish to it. And that you could actually use up to 90% when diluting a product. So let's say you're doing a color match of a home. You have a new brick and an old brick. In order to get the right colorants and to make the old look old on the new brick, you want to use a transparent finish, not a solid. So the fixative is a great alternative for diluting our masonry stains, thus giving you that natural look. And then if you need to sponge in several colors, so say a brick's got a brown, red, orange hue, you could actually do it in sequences, and it's going to be very easy when diluting the product. When the masonry stain is a little bit thicker and opaque in finish, it's going to be very hard in blending 3-4 different undertones in, let's say, brick, for example. The fixative, if you do not have the ECO-PRIM, yes, it could also be used as a primer. However, if we have to, if you ask us what is the best primer, it's always going to be our ECO-PRIM. But at the very least, if you have the fixative, you could also use it as a primer, worst case. But predominantly, it's going to be a thinner. So our next product that we're going to cover is our masonry stain, which is right behind me, right over here. And again, you could use that product to integrate with our ECO-PRIM. So if you need to dilute it up to 10%, you could definitely use our ECO-PRIM. And anything beyond 10%, you would use our fixative, which that you could go up to 90%, again, depending on how much transparency or background you want to come through. So our masonry stain is same technology. It's made with potassium silicate as our main component, and then we obviously add in the fillers and then the mineral pigments that are UV stable to finalize the product. This we recommend specifically on exterior projects anything that's masonry, with the limitation of Hardie boards, and that's going to be our sole silicate. But everything else you could use the masonry stain on. And then the curing phase, it's going to take up to 7 days from installation. So again, if you apply the stain on day 1 after the primer, you want to wait up to 12 hours. And then the next business day likely, or next day, you're going to apply the second coat, for example. And then the actual curing phase on the inside of the brick and cavity will be up to 7 days. The next product is going to be our sole silicate. So what's the difference between that and our masonry stain? It's going to have less water glass, so less potassium silicate, and more silica. And then the pH content is going to be closer to 11 versus our traditional masonry stain is going to be between 11 and 12. So what's cool about it is you could actually apply it to existing paint, whether it's drywall on the inside or on the exterior. As long as it's latex acrylic, the only thing you need to do is remove any chips or flakes, like with any regular paint job, and then you could simply just stain right over. And if you have a project that's a lot of 1,000 square feet or multiple levels, this is a great solution, because typically a media blaster is going to charge you maybe $3 to $4 and upwards to remove paint, and it could get really expensive. So the sole silicate is a great alternative to applying on buildings that have been unfortunately painted previously. And then the other factor is on the interior, when it's a drywall, it will latch on, because that silica is going to, it's kind of like a Gorilla Glue. It's going to latch on to any latex acrylic coatings. Finally, the Hardie Board, you could use the sole silicate, because a Hardie Board, even when it's unpainted from a manufacturer, it comes already primed. So when they put an acrylic primer on it, a traditional masonry stain is not going to be able to soak into that cement fiber surface. So the sole silicate, again, is going to latch on to that primer. And the cool component is, instead of using a regular paint on your Hardie or cement fiber, you have the UV protection. My previous video, I did a non-combustibility test, so we literally torch a Hardie board, and God forbid if the house catches on fire or the building, it's not going to just set itself and start just bubbling all over. So the silicates will go pretty much close to 2,000 degrees. At that point, your Hardie board's going to burn, but it's not going to just set a fire and just go from left to right. So it's also a good safety feature. And then lastly, the UV protection, because a traditional paint is going to have maybe about 3 to 5 years of resin protection. So once that protection is worn off, the colorant's going to start to fade down. Because we use water glass, it ages very slowly, and then you have a mineral pigment on top of it. So that's where you could get up to 20 plus years using that, even on a Hardie board. So it's a good bang for your buck. So that's the difference between the sole silicate and our masonry stain. The last product is our photocatalytic masonry stain. So it's the same base as our traditional stain, but we add photocatalytic properties and ceramic microspheres. Now this product only comes between a white and a medium pastel color, and that's for the ceramic microspheres to act like an insulation shield. So whether it's hot or cold, it's almost the size of a fingernail, but what the thermal insulating property does, it reduces either the heat or cold. So whether you're in a warm or cold climates, the thermal insulating properties are going to work in your favor. And on the outside, the photocatalytic properties are actually going to be more self-cleaning. What that means is that the building itself, any impurities, it's going to basically pull that in, and the entire building is going to remain cleaner. Photocatalytic properties, we could also administer in interior paints, as we have a different line where it actually kills MERS and different types of outbreaks, even in hospital settings. So photocatalytic properties have been around for quite a while, But what they normally do on the outside or the exterior is if you usually have like a dirtier brick or mortar, it actually self-cleans itself a lot better. So for that reason, if you're looking for just a regular masonry stain with those additional properties, that's where we would recommend that product. So thermal insulating properties and self-cleaning properties for a photocatalytic masonry stain. The last final product that we will be bringing on is our masonry sealer. So if you have a retaining wall, if you have any areas where you're missing a downspout or gutter, and then you have water trickling down the side of the wall, that's going to give or promote damage down the road, because a brick is not intended to work like a river type system where when it's raining, it's just streaking down for hours and hours. So in that sequence, if we see any areas that are either A, retaining wall, or B, we see somewhere where there could be streaks, or even C, if you have any lights that are, like metal fixtures, if that starts to oxidize and the water streaks on it and then keeps flowing down, that could prevent different types of coloring down the road, and it could actually damage the surface itself. So if we see any areas where a sealer is required, that's what we would recommend. And even for any of you masons watching this, our sealer actually could be applied like any Prosaco, any Sika, any chimney saver. Our sealer is going to be rated up to 7 years of warranty, but our water vapor transmission is going to be much higher. So if we apply the sealer over the existing areas that have been painted, you will not lose much of the water vapor transmission, which is key. So what that's going to do is it's going to keep the rainwater out, but it's also going to not prevent from the moisture escaping in a right amount or right setting. So our sealer is going to be a great addition for areas that could be problematic. If you have a commercial building up north, and then if you administer a lot of salt and chemicals, or if you have landscaping near a building, you could do 1 or 2 or 3 feet from the ground up, and then you could apply a sealer to protect those areas. We've seen brick walls without any stain where landscaping chemicals have actually destroyed the color of a natural brick, and discolorations were the result of that. So even if you have a building that's not stained, but you administer a lot of different chemicals at the ground level, a sealer could be a good solution. So all of our products could be used by brush, with a roller, or you could use a sprayer. If you use the sealer, if you use the primer or the thinner, you could literally use a garden sprayer. Make sure to control the setting because it's very translucent. If you use our stains and you want to use an actual sprayer, the minimum requirement is 3,000 psi, and we recommend a minimum of a Greco 595 or a Titan 650. So it's strong enough, it's yielding enough, it's pumping out enough stains per minute. And the tip size is going to be a 519 as an example. Thank you for attending this video. We hope that this was educational. For more information, please reach out info@mineralstains.com.